The morning shift at Golden Dragon Restaurant started at 5:30. Lin Chen, who was 11 years old, knew this because she'd been helping there since she was 8. She arrived just as Mrs. Wu was unlocking the back door, her small backpack containing her school uniform and homework she'd try to finish during the lunch lull. "Good morning, little Lin," Mrs. Wu said. Her voice warmed despite the early hour. "Did you eat breakfast?" "Yes, ma'am," Lin lied. There'd been no time and no food at the group home where she lived. But Mrs. Wu would worry if she knew, would try to feed her, and Lin didn't want to take food that the restaurant needed to sell. She went straight to work, her small hands efficient as she organized dishes, wiped down tables, helped prep vegetables in the kitchen. By 7, when the restaurant opened for breakfast service, Lin had already done 2 hours of work. Mrs. Wu would pay her $20 for the day, plus lunch and sometimes dinner. It wasn't much, but Lin saved every penny in a jar hidden under her bed at the group home. She was saving for a future she couldn't quite imagine but desperately hoped existed. A future where she had a real home, a real family, where she wasn't just another forgotten child in the system. Lin had been in foster care since she was 3 years old. She had no memories of her parents, no story about what had happened to them. The social workers said she'd been found abandoned at a hospital. No identification, no note. They'd given her the name Lin Chen because that's what was written on a piece of paper pinned to her clothes. She'd bounced between foster homes and group facilities for 8 years. Some placements were okay, some were terrible, none felt permanent. She'd learned early not to get attached, not to hope too much. Hope hurt worse than anything else when it got crushed. So instead, she worked odd jobs wherever she could find them. The restaurant in the mornings and evenings, helping the elderly couple who ran the corner market on weekends, babysitting for neighbors when they needed it. Anything that would earn her a few dollars and keep her too busy to think about everything she didn't have. The breakfast rush was steady. Lin moved between tables, clearing dishes, refilling water, her movements practiced and efficient. She was small for 11, which made some customers think she was even younger. They'd comment on how cute she was, how hardworking. Sometimes they'd leave her tips, which she'd split with the waitstaff because that seemed fair. Around 9, an older couple came in. Lin had seen them before. They came every few weeks, always ordering the same thing: congee with century egg for the man, steamed buns for the woman. They dressed simply, their clothes clean but worn. They spoke in quiet voices and watched everything with careful attention. Lin seated them at their usual corner table and brought water. "Good morning," she said in her practiced English, accented but clear. "Same as usual?" The woman smiled at her. "You remember?" "Yes, please. Same as usual." Lin nodded and went to put in their order. In the kitchen, Mrs. Wu was cooking, her wok sizzling, the air thick with garlic and ginger. "The couple in the corner?" Lin said. "I know their order." "I'm making it now?" Mrs. Wu glanced at her. "Little Lin, those people have been asking about you." Lin froze. "What do you mean asking about me?" "Just questions. How long you've worked here, where you live, if you have family." I didn't tell them much. It's not my business to share. But they seem very interested. Fear crept up Lin's spine. "Do you think they're social workers? Am I in trouble for working here?" No, nothing like that. They're just curious. Maybe they're impressed by your work ethic. You're a good girl, little Lin. Maybe they want to help." Lin didn't believe that. In her experience, when adults took unusual interest in foster kids, it was never for good reasons. She delivered their food carefully, avoiding eye contact, planning to stay away from their table as much as possible. But when she came to clear their plates, the woman spoke to her in Mandarin. "You work very hard for someone so young." Lin's Mandarin was rusty. She rarely spoke it anymore, but she understood. "I need the money," she replied in English, not wanting to encourage conversation. "For what?" the man asked, also in English now. It was a rude question, really, but something about the way he asked it, with genuine curiosity rather than judgment, made Lin answer honestly. "I'm saving to go to college. When I'm older, I want to be a doctor." The woman's eyes filled with tears so suddenly that Lin stepped back, alarmed. Had she said something wrong? "That's a wonderful dream," the woman said, her voice thick. "A beautiful dream." Lin nodded awkwardly and fled back to the kitchen with their dishes. Over the following weeks, the couple came more frequently. every few days instead of every few weeks. They always sat in Lin's section, always watched her work, always asked questions that seemed both too personal and strangely careful. Mrs. Wu pulled Lin aside one morning. "Little Lin, I need to tell you something. That couple, their name is Chen, like yours. Lots of people are named Chen. Yes, but they've been asking me about the year you came to work here, your birthday, where you lived before, and little Lin, the woman looks at you like—" Mrs. Wu trailed off. "Like what? Like she's seeing a ghost. Or a miracle. I'm not sure which." Lin felt that familiar fear again. "I don't understand." "Neither do I. But I think maybe you should talk to them." Really talk to them. The next time the Chens came in, Lin gathered her courage and approached their table during a slow period. "Mrs. Wu says you've been asking about me. Why?" The couple exchanged glances. Then the woman said, "May we tell you a story?" Lin wanted to say no, wanted to keep her distance. But something in the woman's expression stopped her. She nodded and slid into the booth across from them. 14 years ago, the woman began, my husband and I had a baby girl. We were young, struggling. We'd come to this country with nothing, working terrible jobs, living in one room. We loved our daughter more than anything in the world." Lin's heart started pounding. "But when she was 3 years old, something terrible happened. There was a fire in our building. We barely escaped with our lives. Everything we owned was gone. We had no papers, no identification. It had all burned. We were taken to the hospital, and in the chaos—" Her voice broke. "In the chaos, we were separated from our daughter. By the time we found each other again, she was gone. Social services had taken her. We tried to get her back, but without papers, without proof of who we were, they wouldn't believe we were her parents." The man picked up the story. "We spent years trying to find her, but we'd given her a Chinese name, and the system had given her an English one. We had no photos. They'd burned in the fire. We had nothing to prove she was ours. Eventually, the social workers told us to stop looking, that we were upsetting the child in her placement, that we needed to let her build a new life. But we never stopped," the woman said. "Not really. We worked harder, saved every penny. We eventually got proper documentation, became citizens. We built a business, then another. We kept searching, kept hoping." Lin was shaking. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because 3 months ago," the man said gently, "we hired a private investigator, someone who specializes in finding missing children. And he found something. A girl who was brought into the system 14 years ago, found at a hospital after a fire. Chinese, about 3 years old, with a piece of paper that said Lin Chen." "That's me," Lin whispered. "That's my story." "We know," the woman said, tears streaming down her face now. "We know because we wrote that paper. Lin Chen, it means beautiful morning. It's what we named you when you were born." The restaurant spun around Lin. This couldn't be real. Couldn't be happening. "You're saying you're my parents?" "We're saying we think we might be. We're asking if you'd be willing to take a DNA test to find out for sure." Lin looked at them, really looked at them, for the first time. The man's eyes, the same dark brown as hers. The woman's hands, small and delicate like Lin's own. The way they both tilted their heads slightly when listening, just like she did. "Why didn't you tell me before? Why have you been coming here for months without saying anything?" "Because," the woman said, "we wanted to know you first, to see the person you'd become, and we wanted you to see us, to feel comfortable with us, before we said anything that might be frightening or overwhelming." "Are you—" Lin's voice was small, scared. "Are you rich? Mrs. Wu said you've been asking a lot of questions. Are you going to try to take me away and put me in some fancy school where I don't fit in?" The man smiled sadly. "We are comfortable now, yes. The businesses did well. But we don't want to take you away from your life. We want to be part of it if you'll let us, whatever that looks like." Lin sat very still, trying to process everything. She thought about the years in foster care, the loneliness, the constant moving, the sense that she didn't belong anywhere. And she thought about these two people who dressed simply and ate at a modest restaurant and had spent months just watching her work, learning who she was. What if the DNA test says you're not my parents? "Then we'll still be grateful to have met you," the woman said. "And we'll still want to help you however we can, if you'll let us." "And if it says you are?" "Then we'll ask if you'd like to come home," the man said. "Where you've belonged all along." The DNA test was done the next week. The wait for results felt endless. Lynn continued her routine: school, restaurant, odd jobs. But everything felt different now. Charged with possibility. Mrs. Wu and her husband knew something was happening but didn't push. They just made sure Lynn ate properly and wasn't working too hard. The Chens came to the restaurant every day during those 2 weeks. They didn't ask about the test, didn't pressure her. They just sat at their table, ate their food, and were present. Sometimes Lynn would sit with them during quiet periods, and they'd talk about small things. Her favorite subjects in school, science and math. Their business, they'd started with one small grocery store, and now owned 3. The things they remembered about the baby girl they'd lost: how she loved music, how she'd laugh at everything, how she'd cling to her father's finger when she was scared. When the results finally came back, Lynn was at the restaurant, washing dishes in the kitchen. Mrs. Wu came to get her, her face soft with emotion. "Little Lynn, the Chens are here. They have an envelope." Lynn dried her hands slowly, her heart racing. She walked out to their corner table on legs that felt unsteady. They stood when they saw her coming. The woman was crying already. The man's hands were shaking as he held out the envelope. "Would you like to open it?" he asked. "Or should we?" "You do it," Lynn whispered. "I'm too scared." The man opened the envelope with careful fingers and pulled out the official-looking document inside. His eyes scanned the page, and then he looked at his wife and then at Lynn, and his own eyes filled with tears. "Lynn Chen," he said, his voice breaking. "Our daughter, our beautiful morning. You're ours. You've always been ours." Lynn felt something break open inside her, something that had been locked tight for 8 years. She started crying, huge gasping sobs that she couldn't control. The woman moved first, pulling Lynn into her arms, holding her the way Lynn had dreamed of being held for as long as she could remember. "I'm sorry," the woman kept saying. "I'm so sorry we lost you. I'm so sorry you were alone. I'm so sorry it took us so long to find you." "Mama?" The word came out uncertain, a question. "Yes, my baby, yes, I'm your mama." Lynn turned to the man, who was crying openly now too. "Baba?" "Yes, Lin Chen, I'm your Baba, and we're never letting you go again." Around them, the restaurant had gone quiet. Mrs. Wu was crying, along with half the staff and several customers. It was the kind of moment that defied explanation. That felt too big for the small space, too profound for an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. But it was real. After 8 years of searching, of hoping, of working toward a future she couldn't quite imagine, Lynn had found what she'd been looking for all along: a family, her family. The transition wasn't immediate. There were legal processes to navigate, social worker visits, court hearings. Lynn continued living at the group home while everything was sorted out. But now she had regular visits with her parents, her real parents, proven by science and recognized by the state. She learned that her father, Chen Wei, and her mother, Chen Hua, had built their businesses through relentless work and careful saving. They weren't billionaires exactly, but they were wealthy enough that Lynn would never have to worry about money again. Wealthy enough that her college fund was already secure, her future bright with possibilities. But they didn't flaunt their wealth. They still lived modestly, still ate at simple restaurants, still valued hard work and kindness above material possessions. "We learned," her father explained, "that the things that matter, family, love, integrity, those don't come from money. We spent years with nothing, and what hurt wasn't the poverty. It was losing you." 3 months after the DNA test, Lynn moved into her parents' home. It was larger than anywhere she'd ever lived, but not ostentatious. They'd prepared a room for her but let her decorate it herself. They enrolled her in a good school, but asked her opinion about which one. They gave her freedom but also structure, space but also presence. And slowly, carefully, Lynn learned to be a daughter. To trust that this wasn't temporary. To believe that she'd finally found home. She still worked at the restaurant on weekends, though Mrs. Wu insisted she didn't need to anymore. But Lynn wanted to. It reminded her of where she'd come from, of the girl who'd survived on odd jobs and determination. One Saturday afternoon, 6 months after moving in with her parents, Lynn was clearing tables when a little girl came in with her foster family. Lynn recognized the look in the child's eyes. Wary, uncertain, trying not to hope for anything. Lynn brought them water and smiled at the little girl. First time here? The girl nodded shyly. The dumplings are really good. And Mrs. Wu in the kitchen, she has a big heart. This is a safe place. Something in the girl's expression softened just slightly. After they left, Lin's mother, who'd been watching from the corner table, she and her husband still occupied when they came to visit, smiled at her daughter. You gave her hope, she said. Someone gave it to me, Lin replied. Seems like I should pass it on. That evening, Lin sat with her parents in their living room. Her father was reading the newspaper, her mother working on embroidery. Lin was doing homework, occasionally asking for help with a difficult math problem. It was ordinary. Beautifully, perfectly ordinary. And Lin Chin, the restaurant girl who'd survived on odd jobs and dreams, the foster child who'd given up on happy endings, the daughter who'd been lost and then found, felt something she'd never quite felt before. She felt like she was home. Not because of the nice house or the financial, security or even the DNA test that proved her biology, but because she was sitting with two people who loved her, who'd never stopped looking for her, who'd proven that some bonds couldn't be broken by time or distance or circumstance. Her beautiful morning had finally come.